This is coffee number 5. I'm your host, Lara Schmoisman. Hi, you guys. Welcome back to coffee number 5. My coffee is getting cold again because we had a little longer pre-chat than usual. But I'm happy about that because I have a lot of information to share with you today. And as I told you many times, and you heard it over and over, I suffer from migraines. It's something that, and no, migraine is not a headache. Migraine is it's very painful. I really hope that nobody listening had to experience it. But migraines are triggered by a lot of things in your life. And even you can be food you eat. Even a smell can trigger a migraine. Today, there is a lot more medicine and a lot more knowledge about migraine than back then. But one of the things that I understood about myself, the migraines and the body, is that we can get like intoxicated and with things that we put or we eat. And I got to meet a new brand. It's not that new, it's been around a couple of years, but it has a lot of backing from the medical part, which I think is super interesting for people who are really having sensitivity to so many issues. So let me stop talking and welcome to Annie Stansik. Did I say it right?
You got it right.
Okay,
Perfect.
I did
Hello.
it. I'm
Hi.
getting better. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to have you here and to hear a little more about how Untoxicated came across.
Thank you. And I'm a genuine fan of the podcast, so I'm very excited to be here and share anything and everything as it relates to, my background going from big CPG and big beauty into
Yeah.
a small startup world, the need we're solving. So I'm here for it.
This is amazing. Thank you so much. So you've been at Unilever. You were at
hmm
candy companies. You've been
hmm
really involved in the CPG world and you saw it from the different angles. And it's very
Yeah.
different to how did you transition into those big roles? How did you decide, okay, I'm done and I'm going to do
Yeah.
something else? How did it happen?
Yeah, so, I have to say I'm an accidental founder. I really didn't expect to find myself, in a true kind of founder seat. But what I can say is that, I started or kind of cut my teeth in some of these larger organizations, the Unilevers, the Diageos of the world. And before that, in my past life, I was actually focused on the agency side, doing some brand strategy and innovation work. And it turns out, kind of when I made the transition, I really wanted to understand, what does it take to operate a business? What does it mean? We'd
Yeah.
make these great recommendations, and I'd always wonder, like, how hard is it really? And it turns out it's harder than one would think. But
Yeah.
what I
And
found in that operating,
I always say that it makes me a better
yeah,
marketer because I understand all
100%.
that part now.
100%, right? To kind of have the empathy and having walked in both
Yeah.
shoes to kind of really understand the realities of both.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was kind of spending some time in the operating world, I realized that part of me was still really tugging towards kind of the big picture thinking and the strategy and building brands and connecting with the consumer. But what I loved about operating is you were a degree closer in terms of being able to make that a reality. And I just found that those opportunities were a little bit fewer and further between within some of these larger organizations. Now, of course, those models are changing and they're incubating smaller brands. But what that started for me was this journey. I kind of joke of the Goldilocks where I'm trying the
Mm-hmm.
different beds. But in this situation, I kind of found my way into these smaller and smaller organizations where I found that I had the ability more to be whether the brand's been around forever and really needs to be, rehabilitated or reimagined. Or look, we're wanting to launch something brand new. How can we kind of create from the ground up? And as I kind of was on that journey, I'm helping to lead a health and wellness company that worked with a lot of medical doctors.
Mm-hmm.
And through that, I got connected with my now co-founder at Untoxicated, and his name's Dr. Martin Smith, and he works at the Cleveland Clinic. and, had this problem that he was looking to solve. And very fortuitously, the problem he was looking to solve was something I was dealing with for the first time as a consumer. And, not to be a spoiler alert, but it was skin sensitivity after spending decades. My first job, I joke, and my longest employer was at Ulta. But then spending decades within beauty, putting everything on and in my, body, I started to develop sensitive skin in my early 30s, which is quite common. And so again, fortuitously, I met my co-founder who specialized in sensitive skin, was seeing this issue in his patients, and I'm dealing with it both as a consumer, but then someone that spent decades within beauty and personal care, and saying, if I'm struggling to find good solutions, what does that mean for the average person?
I love that you found the problem and then you went and got a solution. But I'm super interested. How did you get the solution? How was your process of getting the solution? Because it's not so easy.
Yep.
It's not only about the ingredients, it's finding the contract manufacturer. You come from the part of branding, so I know that probably came easy to you. Oh, you have it in your mind what you wanted. That happened to me too. But the whole other part that we weren't involved before, that's the hard part. So what was your experience?
Totally. So I'm happy to share that. And one of the things that I would say is, I think one misconception about my background and transitioning into a startup world is that so much of what I did, leading billion-dollar businesses at these large organizations, translates to being a day one starter, a startup founder. The reality is so much of it is just persistence, creative problem solving, removing obstacles. So I would say that kind of connects to how did we go about this? Yeah.
Crying, and then get up.
The emotional roller coaster. Yeah. Yeah. But I think that, I think that's very much kind of how we went about finding the solution. So I will say, in Martin, his background's organic chemistry. You don't want to see how I did in high school and college in those classes. So we're great compliments. But he really started to get into all of the empirical research to start to kind of identify, taking a step back, what he was seeing, and I'm going to share this because it helps you understand kind of how we went about formulating, was that patients were coming in. He's an allergist and immunologist that specialized in sensitive skin. They were using a lot of these kind of leading dermatologist recommended sensitive friendly brands, and many of the ingredients in them were creating problems for people's skin to an increasing degree and with an increasing kind of prevalence. So he started to turn those around, decomped all of the ingredients, and started to just get into the research. So again, no silver bullet here, really just had the curiosity and the persistence to say, what's going on here? Can I identify the problems? And then can I create something that eliminates as many of these as possible? And so, he kind of had this concept, he had the research.
Let me ask you a question. Was his intention to eliminate the amount of ingredients that you put, or just to be very selective in the combination?
Both. So first and foremost, a lot of these products still contain things that have been science, like the medical community has raised their hand and said, these are known allergens and irritants for skin. And so for him, it was, let's eliminate as many of these as possible. And we got to formulas that eliminate over 99% of those. 100% isn't completely possible. If you want, a stable formula that's going to be okay to sit on shelves, you're not worried about contamination, but kind of first of its kind in that regard. So it was let's eliminate as many of those as possible. But in doing that, everything that's in our product has to have an intention. So, it's not just there unnecessarily because it's a filler or it's, and so we kind of say our products have everything.
It's what people are looking for nowadays. They're working for performance. They're looking for performance. They're not looking just for pretty boxes.
Totally. And I think, kind of as we were chatting about both of our skincare lines and kind of the intentions we have, I think we have the benefit of some tailwinds in the category where you have consumers that, whether it's a problem they're addressing, this idea of sensitive skin, it's a 20% jump in 2 decades. It's now over 70% of people, or it's more of a proactive consciousness around, I don't want to have problems, so I'm more aware of what I put on and in my body. I think we have the benefit of that. That's really kind of helped us, especially for folks that aren't so acutely sensitive they can't use anything else. But for us, we kind of say it's everything your skin needs without the unwanted extras.
Mhm.
And so everything is limited ingredient. It's, 13 ingredients or less. So it's not just eliminating over 99% of those irritants or allergens, so anything that's going to bother your skin, but it's also adding back the things your skin needs to be healthy and thrive.
Okay,
Um,
there's a myth out there, and there are a lot of people
mhm,
now that they're going for organic products.
yeah,
And I know that in my personal life that some organic
yeah.
products are not so good for me.
Mhm. Totally. I would say organic is great for food, not always great as it relates to what we put on our bodies. And there are a few reasons why we would say that. So, some of these kind of organic or natural ingredients, I'll kind of use those a little bit synonymously, although organic is kind of a better version of natural, as we know. Um, some of these ingredients are great. They have wonderful benefits for the skin. Some of them are not great. So we always, my co-founder, Dr. Smith, jokes, poison ivy is natural and it can be organic. But does that mean it's good for your skin? So I think there's a little bit of there's quite a bit actually of misinformation and a misunderstanding that just because it's organic or organic and natural, means that it's good for you. The second thing is just because it's organic doesn't necessarily mean it's better for the environment. So some of these kind of lab manufactured chemicals are actually more consistent and more stable. You're not having to mine the environment in the same way. And because they're created in the lab, you're less worried about variability and contaminants and other things. And so, from our standpoint, the way we formulate is it all has to be science backed and endorsed by the medical community. It's not, is it natural and organic or is it not? It's what does the empirical literature say? And if it is natural and organic and the empirical literature supports it, we're all for it. But if it doesn't, then, it doesn't deserve to
And
be in our
how
products.
do you align in this brand? And because one thing is about products that are good for you and other products
Mm-hmm.
that they are not considered as clean. And I
Mm-hmm.
understand that this brand is a brand that you guys wanted for efficacy.
Yeah.
So can you be clean or credo clean in this case, or like high
Yeah.
standards of clean and at the same time be efficient?
I think absolutely. I don't necessarily think that those things are natural tensions. I think there are a lot of ingredients that the world of clean skincare has kind of demonstrated are quite efficacious. Our challenge with the clean beauty space, and I'll say my challenge personally as somebody that's been in this space for decades, Credo's definition is different than Sephora's, is different than
Yeah.
Ulta's, is different than maybe X, Y, and Z manufacturers. So there's no standard definition of clean. And frankly, standard definition of a lot of these terms, hypoallergenic, a number of these other things. So with that, I think there's just a lot of gray area and, disagreement as to what is considered clean and what's not. In our case, we really work to kind of circumvent that whole debate. We're clinical skincare, not clean skincare. So if there's an ingredient that kind of overlaps, right, and the clean community loves and the scientific community loves, it's in our product. But we're really, again, kind of focused on all of the empirical and the scientific data around these ingredients. And that's kind of what we hold up and champion. Now, all that to be said, the clean movement, I think, stands for so much that I think is great. Do we need to test on animals? Can we be vegan and, cruelty? Like all of these other kind of broader considerations, we should absolutely, I think, be considering as kind of responsible business leaders. And we've adopted all of that into kind of the way that we operate in our ethos. But in terms of how we formulate, we're really not looking at that and saying, here's yet another definition of clean. We're really looking at kind of like, what does the clinical data say in our case? But again, I think efficacious and clean can coexist. I would just challenge, what is the definition of clean?
That's fascinating. We can have a whole
Yeah,
podcast about that. But let me,
100%.
ask you a question. Because
Mm-hmm.
again, you coming from a brand created by a doctor who has a very
Mm-hmm.
unique office and unique patients. What's the
Mm-hmm.
business model for your brand? Is going into big retail or going more into the doctor spa space?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we spent a lot of time kind of discussing this, and it was pretty clear to us that while Dr. Smith saw, and I call him Martin, saw a number of the really extreme end of sensitivity in his practice, 7 out of 10 people have sensitive skin. So this is fundamentally a challenge that the mass or the majority of the marketplace is dealing with or contending with, whether it's episodic or ongoing and enduring. So our perspective was, should we be creating a solution that 2 or 3 out of those 10 can access and afford, or that everyone has access to in terms of price point and availability? And we really felt like, we believe in and wanted to create a better solution that was affordable and available for anyone when they, who needs it when they need it. And so for us, our ambition is fundamentally to disrupt the kind of clinical skincare space at the mass shelf, the Targets, the Walmarts of the world with our product. And we would be looking to medical doctors and these experts, not to sell our products, but as kind of the thought partners, whether it's sampling or endorsing or other things, to build that awareness and that advocacy with their patients.
That's very interesting. And so how long have you been in the market so far?
So we launched last May, June. So we've been in market for, I'd have to do the math, about 16 or so months. And then we worked on the formulations for about 3 years preceding that.
Wow. And so how has been the experience of being in the market? Right now, you're D2C by itself, right?
Yes, so we're available via our website and Amazon. And again, our goal is kind of ultimately to scale into additional, e-commerce and brick and mortar retailers.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's been wild. It's been
Yeah.
fun, but it's been wild. I would say, the first thing that comes to mind is I don't think we appreciated how much money really exchange hands behind the scenes in this category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how much it costs to show out there, to show up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, with margins, in our case, we're fighting against a number of very large incumbent brands, some of the largest in a Target or a Walmart, if you walk through the store, owned by some of the largest consumer goods companies in the world. So when you think about not only the margins for personal care tend to be healthy, which gives quite a bit of money, especially at scale, to be able to spend, but then deep pockets of the owners of these brands, we're competing against very large budgets. And then with that, the way the money is being spent to be able to get in front of people, whether it's via advertising, even if the return on ad spend isn't, something that we would be willing to tolerate, just to kind of maintain that airspace, or with medical doctors, just to be able to maintain that airspace has been a lot. Like that's probably the thing that keeps us up at night in terms of we can't outspend. So much of being in a startup world is how do we outthink and outmaneuver with the resources we have?
Yeah, but also, how do you insert yourself in such a busy space?
Totally. Totally. The way I think I have the benefit of kind of leading some of these larger brands. And so kind of going back to the spirit of how do you insert yourself, our perspective is, it always starts with the consumer. We need to show up where they are and where they'd expect us, but can we do that in different ways that help us break through? And some of it is, can we use our competitors' playbooks against them? Can we do things they would never do? So, one example is last year we launched a cream, like this kind of like really awesome occlusive cream, had won a bunch of awards. We did some early consumer testing, and the blind trials of it, our product was preferred 2-to-1 versus the number one selling cream in the market, full stop. It's the number one SKU on Amazon come winter, not even in skincare, like period. And so all that to be said, we thought, well, wait a second, our competitors would never come out and do a head-to-head, Coke Pepsi challenge in that way. Why don't we do that with people and then do like a little bit of like a viral, unveil to see if that catches on, to say, David and Goliath, try it blind, see which one you prefer. And sure enough, the results played out as they did in research. And then when people turned it over, they're like, not only do we prefer this product experience, but you're vegan and cruelty free. You've got better ingredients. You've got less of the bad. So for us, it kind of disproportionately, created share of voice and helped us break through. So it's a lot of, again, like how do we think and distort our resources in kind of smarter and more clever ways that our competitors might not?
I think that's one of the advantages that we have. I say we because we work with so many brands that they are in early stages of middle stages brands. And you are, because there are less people involved, you can be a lot, you can spin, you can change, you can pivot fast. And you don't need to make decisions such a big deal. You just can go and execute.
Absolutely. And that has been a really cool and really fun part of the process. It's also daunting because you're existing in a world where sometimes, and I love your perspective, it almost feels like the possibilities are endless.
I
So how do you
know.
prioritize the thing you're going to go against? So it is. It's. I think we do have the privilege of a lot of, we get the data and we can respond quickly and react to it. Whether it's paid media and we want to test, a hook or a creative, or doing something like, so and so posted about us virally. Let's lean in and do something kind of over the top with it in a way that you don't have to get on the phone to get a hold of your person at the PR agency to have them get the product to send it's
Yeah.
just, I think that's an advantage we're really, working to lean into, to your point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just did a blog actually. And if you guys don't subscribe to my blog, subscribe. And you'll find out about collaborations that you want to collaborate with these young brands because they're young and they're hungry. I think collaborations is the best thing that can happen to brands because you amplify. And like I always say, in Spanish, we have a saying that says, tell me who you hang out with, and I tell you who you are. So it's good
Mm-hmm.
to just align yourself with brands that you have similar values or that you are in the same space and that you can help. I think that there is space for everyone. You just need to learn how to work together.
I think that's such a brilliant point and kind of like tactic as it relates to how do you break through with more limited resources. It's exactly that, aligning with other properties, whether it's influencers or celebrities, medical experts, or brands. To your point, you can tap into their audience and you're at the same time building awareness and equity because you're suddenly affiliated with another brand the audience, has love for, that, can then side by side, demonstrate, like we share these values and other things. And we've even done that with other skincare brands. To your
Yeah.
point, like there's room for, more than one of us in a routine. And the reality is you don't open somebody's vanity and find, even in mine, you don't find all just intoxicated. So there really is opportunity to collaborate and grow, which is fantastic
Absolutely.
in that way. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let me ask you a question because I'm
Yeah.
looking at your startup line and you were telling me that right now you have four products, right?
Hmm.
There is
Hmm.
any reason why you decided four and not three or
Yeah, great question. So we launched with two actually, and then
Hmm.
we introduced our third last fall and our fourth just a couple weeks ago. So
Oh,
for us,
congratulations.
yeah, thank you. Part of our ethos is kind of less can be more, and I know we've talked about this as it relates to our own skin journeys. That you don't need to have a 13-step routine, but in fact, fewer, more simple things can actually be more powerful if you kind of give your skin what it needs and then kind of get out of the way. And so for us, we really wanted to start with the core of a skincare routine because that's fundamentally, if people are doing anything, they're cleansing and moisturizing. And that's where, where a number of Dr. Smith's patients were coming in and getting caught up is like, my skin can't tolerate anything else because I'm stripping it when I cleanse it. Or, I'm having so many issues because like I can no longer handle a moisturizer. So we really wanted to start there in terms of if you've got the base of a routine down, I kind of say it's a lot like nutrition. If you eat healthy 80% of the time, your body can handle the 20% pretty well if you want to go out or go on vacation and rebound.
Hmm.
Similar with skin. If you've got the right fundamentals, it's able and it's healthy, you're able to tolerate a lot. So we started there. And then we launched our cream last year, knowing that especially if you've got sensitive skin, dry and sensitive skin have quite a bit of overlap. Our lotion was not sufficient for winter. So we wanted something that, again, would kind of meet the needs of the most of our audience that we could. And then our micellar as a complement just launched because the reality is not only is wearing makeup, so micellar is a 3-in-1 makeup remover, no rinse, cleanser, and
Yeah,
toner.
I
But
was about to ask you. I mean, that's a super interesting combination.
yeah, yeah, and not only is wearing makeup irritating, but the act of removing it is also irritating. And so Martin was finding that Dr. Smith was finding that a lot of his patients were also having issues with that, which is I might have found a mascara that works for me, but taking it off is a
I
nightmare because I'm doing
know.
so much rubbing. The product is so irritating because of what's in it. So that felt like a natural extension for us as well, which is again kind of everything starting with the consumer need or the consumer problem kind of
Well,
expanding out from
that's great
there.
that you have that
Yeah.
consumer focus group all day long being in a doctor office.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So between, Martin having that kind of with his patients in the more extreme group, but kind of world being, between myself, not conflating myself as the sole consumer, but having sensitive skin in my needs, and then being able to build kind of a community around us with kind of intoxicated consumers has been so great to sanity check. Does this make sense? Does this resonate with you? What should we introduce next? And really kind of anchoring ourselves in that.
So what's next for the brand?
Yeah. So I think as we look forward, two things. So one is we're really focused on how do we continue to grow our awareness and our community so that we can build kind of enough of a force around ourselves to kind of scale into that increased retail distribution, as I mentioned.
Mhm.
And then the second part of that is really kind of along with that, how are we growing our brand and our assortment from a product portfolio standpoint? And, there are a number of places we could go, but I would also say one of the benefits that we have as a D2C brand, kind of compared to our competitors, is we have a more, I think, intimate relationship and feedback loop in some regards than we do brands that are just sold through Walmart and have social handles. And so we're really leaning on our community to say, where should we go and how should we build ourselves out? Whether it's, where should we show up on our path to getting to an Ulta target, or what products, are you most in need of? And every single write-in we get tons of customer service emails, social comments. We keep track of every single one of them to kind of guide us on our path ahead
Yeah,
in that
and
regard.
that's absolutely the best thing you can do is learning from
Mhm.
the social proof and the audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
If
Absolutely.
you had to start the process all over again, what would you do
Ooh,
different?
man, I'm about to like tears thinking of going through that, like the founder scars. What would I do differently?
A trauma.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I would have focused on kind of leaning into and finding a network of founders earlier on. So I think the number of times where I've been like, I really don't know how to solve for X, or you know what, I really need someone that can help with this very specific
Oh,
problem or challenge, or can sanity check me.
I'm so
Yeah,
glad you said that because this is one of the
yeah,
recommendations I always give my founders, my clients, is
yeah,
go to events, network, get to meet other people. I mean, if someone sees the competition is not the person that you want to be aligned with, find people because I really find that there are very generous people out there and they're
yeah.
ready to help you.
100%. And that, we were talking about this kind of, a little while ago, which is, I think again, one of my misconceptions and a common one was my background, big CBG would translate into being a founder. And it has to a very small degree. But I think as a result of that, I was a little bit slower to building these kind of allies that really understand this world. And almost everyone I've spoken with, to your point, Laura, is like, I would love to pay it forward because someone helped me get here. And so there is this community and spirit of generosity that I chat regularly with some people that would kind of be considered competitors in terms of where we're going. Not head to head, but there's overlap. But we're all just here to help each other because we think there's room to succeed, and we all respect the fact that we're kind of pursuing passions and
And
ambitions. So
also
that's been so
we
cool. Yeah.
understand that a brand is not for everyone, that you're not gonna get everyone. There is people for Coke and there is people for Pepsi, and there is another option
Absolutely.
too. So the same happens with any kind of product.
Absolutely. And I've been so inspired by the number of people that share that mentality, and this idea of, yeah, there's kind of room for, a lot of people. And I think being an entrepreneur can be so isolating
It
sometimes.
is.
And there's this,
Like
I
I
think
always say, it's lonely up here.
it's lonely, and it's hard to put into words because I think so much of it is not just what you're learning from the job, but I found what I've learned about myself and my needs from these experiences, that it's
Yes.
hard to put into words what that emotional roller coaster can be like. But I think there's, within the kind of the startup community I found my way into, a lot of respect for that journey, even if the products, to your point, are technically competitive, but therefore a willingness to be like, it is lonely. I respect the hell out of your doing. How do we help each other? And frankly, I didn't find a lot of that in the corporate world. I found it a lot more in the startup world, where in some ways the stakes are higher because we're not making a salary and this is all of our, each of our ambitions or dreams. So that's been really cool. I would have done that day one.
Well, Annie, thank you so much for having coffee with me. This was lovely.
Of course. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was great to chat.
And to you guys, we'll see you next week with more coffee number 5.
Find everything you need at laraschmoisman.com or in the episode notes right below. Don't forget to subscribe.
It was so good to have you here today. See you next time. Catch you on the flip side. Ciao, ciao.